Hello YouTube, this is OBIS. Thank you for joining me for another sound design tutorial. In this week's episode, we will be taking a look at making a disco style lead synth. You can call it a deep house, tech house lead synth as well. And let's hear how that sounds in context with a beat I made for the tutorial. Alright, so that's the lead that we'll be working on. It's just a preset I made for one of my sound packs. So let's get started. In Ableton, let's hit Control-Shift-T or Command-Shift-T if you're using Mac. And if you're not using Ableton, just open a new MIDI track. Let's go to our plugins folder and open up an instance of HIVE. Or if you have Silent, I would recommend using that. It's very similar to HIVE. And if you don't have either of those, these principles are pretty, usable for any synth that you decide to use. So let's mute this, close it, and let's get started. So first thing we want to do, well actually for context, let's copy over our MIDI clip so that we can hear how that sounds, and we want to initialize our patch. So let's go to presets, user, init, and let's hear how that sounds. Alright, so doesn't sound too great right now, so let's get started. It's a lead, so first thing we want to do is under mode, let's go to mono. We want to go to our oscillator 1, and for our first waveform, we want to go to select a pulse. Let's bring it up to 3 voices. Bring it up by an octave. Keep the width at full, keep the phase at random. Let's go over here to where it says MM1. These are our modulation and destination sources for HIVE, and Silent has a very similar setup. Other synths have their own way of doing it as well. In this case, we're using a pulse width wave. That's a tongue twister. Say that 10 times fast. And we want to go to source under constant. That is going to control the width of our pulse. So right now, this is how it sounds. So you're getting that hollow register, which is, typical of the pulse. So if you want to control exactly how hollow or whatever you want to call it is, the width, let's control the constant. So let's click here until you get a little crosshair. We'll drag it up to the picture until you get a little yellow box around the picture of the pulse wave. And now you're controlling the pulse width. So let's see how that sounds. Okay, right around there sounds good. And as you can see from sweeping around, you can obviously automate that with an LFO or a filter cutoff envelope, and you can get some interesting results there as well. In this case, we're just gonna keep it straightforward, and we just want to find the timbre that we want. And we're gonna go with that. Next thing we want to do is go over to oscillator 2, and in HIVE, in order to hear the extra oscillators, you see over here oscillator 1, it's already selected. That's why we hear it, it's lit up. So let's just click there on oscillator 2 so we can hear it. And let's change the waveform. Let's pick narrow, which is basically a narrow pulse or square wave, whatever you look at it as. You want to add 4 voices so we have a little width to detune with. And let's do a little detune for oscillator 1 as well. Let's bring the volume up in oscillator 2. And let's also enable the sub 1 and sub 2 oscillators, which basically you can look at that as just the 3rd and 4th oscillator of HIVE. For oscillator sub 1, we will pick a triangle. Let's bring the pitch up to 0. Let's bring the volume a bit down. And for sub 2, we want to pick a white noise. We're going to keep the pitch where it is because white noise doesn't have a pitch, so it really doesn't matter. And for volume, we just want to bring that down And let's hear how that sounds. Okay, now let's go over to the amplitude 1 envelope. So this is going to control the overall amplitude envelope of oscillator 1, and as well as sub 1, everything on this side. So what we want to do is bring up the decay all the way up, bring up the sustain all the way up. We can leave the attack where it is and the release where it is. And let's go over to this side, and we want to change the shape of amplitude 2 envelope just a bit, just since it has a white noise, just to make it sound a little different in the stereo spectrum. It's always a good thing. Makes your sound a little more complex. So let's bring down the sustain a bit, leave the release where it's at, and you can leave the decay where it's at. So now that we're done basically getting like the body of the sound, let's hear how that sounds. Okay, so now we can start sculpting it with a filter envelope. So let's go over to our filter 1, and let's bring down our filter cutoff quite a bit. I'll say roughly about there. Let's bring up our resonance a bit. Let's go over to filter 2, bring down our cutoff as well. Bring up our resonance. Now what we want to do is go over to this mod 1 envelope slider section, which basically this shape is controlled, this amount. Basically you can boost it, and this is the filter cutoff shape. So basically what we want to do is we want no sustain in the shape of this filter cutoff, and we want to bring down the decay just a bit, and to introduce that cutoff envelope, let's just bring up our mod amount. Okay, so I brought up the release a bit there. So that's basically, you want that full rich sound, and you want it to come from the very low register, and you want it to open up with that sharp filter cutoff that we made by bringing down the sustain to 0 and by adjusting the decay to taste to make it tighter, snappier, or more open. So that's this side. Let's go over to the oscillator 2 section. We can also introduce a little bit filter cutoff envelope. So let's pick 1, which is basically going to be using the same envelope we set up. Let's boost up the amount as well. Okay. Next thing we want to do is go down to the modulation source and destination section one more time, and we will use this empty mod 2 slider section. Since we're not using it, we're basically using the same mod for both of these sides for the filter cutoff, so we can use 2 in this case. Oh, I'm sorry, we could use 2 over here, and I'll show you what I'm going to do right here. So basically with mod 2, you want to bring your release all the way down, your sustain all the way down. You want to bring your decay really tight, and we're going to control this. And the way to hear how it's going to sound is you go down to your source section, pick mod 2, so that you're selecting this slider section. And in mod 2, we're going to pick both, we're going to use both of these slots. So one of them is going to go right here under semitone. So that's basically going to control the pitch of oscillator 1. We're going to do the same to oscillator 2 side. So now we're controlling the pitch, and we're going to bring these sliders up so that we can start getting a snappy kind of attack to the sound. And we're going to control that with the decay on mod 2. So as you can see, I just want to introduce just a bit, just add a little snap, and that'll help catch reverbs or other effects, delays, and it'll also help cut through the mix as well. Okay, so all that is without effects, keep in mind. So let's just hear how that sounds with the beat, which it's not gonna, maybe might not cut through the mix as well, but I mean, let's just hear it. Okay, not bad, and we're not done with the sound yet. We haven't done effects, and we're gonna add a little vibrato and, you know, just a little polishing up. But it's always good to get a good raw sound without having to add any effects on it, because that just shows you that you're going in the right direction. So next thing I would like to do is start adding some effects. So let's add a little distortion. Hive gives you a few different options. It's really just a taste. Corrode's a very heavy one. Foldback is the one I used for the previous preset, and you know, it could be really heavy, but if you adjust it just subtly, you can actually get some pretty interesting results. So let's hear how that sounds. Okay, and let me solo that might help you guys, huh? So it adds a little more thickness in there. What I like to do is adjust the tone as well. Okay, let's add a little delay in there. We have our timings over here. We can leave it on ping pong. We have 1/8. I want to put this side to 1/8 double. And let's bring down the mix a bit. And let's hear how that sounds. Bring up our high pass a bit. Okay. Next we should go to the reverb, so we can add a little, some space. So I just brought down the size a bit, bring up the decay, brought up the width a bit, bring up the tone, and you can adjust the mix down a bit. You can add some reverb or some EQ. Alright, so just boosted the highs a bit and cut the lows a bit. Basically just sweep to find the frequency you like and boost or cut. It's really just to taste. You don't have to do this. You could do this through Ableton. You know, I probably would throw another EQ through Ableton after just to cut extra lows. This is just more to color the sound a bit, to sculpt the sound further. Next thing I want to do is turn on the compressor. Let's bring down the output level a bit because this is going to get a little louder. And I want to bring up the amount until we start getting gain reduction. And, you know, it's going to boost up the volume, of course, but this is just going to kind of glue the sound together and also bring up the levels substantially. Okay, so as you can see, it's definitely cutting through the mix better now, and you know, it's roughly the sound, I would say. One thing I added in the original sound you heard was just a little bit vibrato, and an easy way to do it in Hive is just has a vibrato feature under each of oscillator 1 and 2. So just bring up the vibrato maybe about like halfway. And if you hear it now, I'll just show you as an example. It's going to be playing the vibrato all the way through. which is probably not going to be what you want in most cases. I mean, if it is, that's cool, but if, you know, in this case, you just want to have it on like the long hailed notes. So there's a delay feature under here where it says vibrato, LFO, rate. So this delay, basically, like the further you bring it up, the later it like basically lags, and then the vibrato acts. So it starts bending. It gives you that little bending, pitchy effect. So, you know, just bring up the delay to taste. I didn't want it too long or too short, so I just played it, you know, by ear and kind of tweaked the knob until I found a good point that I thought was good. So let's hear it. So yeah, so as you can see, you don't really hear it until the long hail notes, and you know, you can obviously do it more dramatic. I just want it very subtle in this effect, but obviously if you're doing some more like, you know, mainstream progressive or EDM trance stuff, you know, you can have some super detuned saws and, you know, hyper saws, and you can just crank up the vibrato and bump up the delay, and you know, people like Zed do that, and a lot of artists honestly do it, and he's not the first to do it, but he's just, you know, a popular example. So anyways, I hope you guys enjoy. Let's hear back the track on my way out, and please subscribe and enjoy. Take care, guys. Appreciate it.